All right. Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started here, knowing that a few more folks will join while we're doing the intros here. But I am John Bagwell. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia Clinicians for Climate Action. We're very excited for next week's Advocacy Day and all of the activities going on associated with that. And I trust that most of you are aware of that event since this one is linked to it, though not necessary to be attending Advocacy Day to find value in good information in this webinar that we'll be doing today. With that, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. Everyone is in listen only mode and not on video for this is a webinar format. We're going to encourage folks to submit questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature, which is in the Zoom menu. We will take those questions towards the end of the call or along the way if one's highly relevant and can be quickly answered in that way throughout the presentation. But with that, I'm pleased to turn it over to VCCA's chair, Dr. Samantha Dude.
Well, hello, everyone. It's great to see you all on this webinar today. VCCA, was founded in order to bring the clinician voice to climate solutions in Virginia, and I'm thrilled that this year will be our 7th annual Advocacy Day. We really are the first and only organization to bring diverse health professionals to the General Assembly to speak in support of climate solutions that protect the health and safety of our patients and communities. Pulling off this event, which has grown over the years and is now last year, I believe we had over 65 members. It really takes a great effort by our amazing team. I want to thank John, Ryan, Tess, and Hannah for all the work they do to make this event possible. And also to our amazing VCCA advocacy chair, Dr. Robert Kitchen, who we'll be hearing from today, as well as advocacy team members, Dr. Joel Temme and Paul DiLorenzo. So with that, it's my pleasure to pass the control to Dr. Kitchen, who will tell us about this year's Advocacy Day and our priorities.
Thank you, Sam. That was a very nice introduction. I too want to share thanks and recognition to Hannah, Tess, John, and Ryan for the work they have done. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. There we go. See the slides okay? Excellent. Okay. Well, as Sam said, this is our 7th annual Advocacy Day, and this is the yearly presentation that I give as a preview to Advocacy Day. And I've broken it into 2 parts. We're going to talk about those issues that directly affect or are covered in our Advocacy Day next week on Wednesday and Thursday. And then the second part will be a review that I've done before about the General Assembly, the legislative process, and how to hold an effective meeting. And VCCA has 3 main pillars relative to the work that we do to address the impact of climate change on our patients, our family, our neighbors. And these areas are education and research, community outreach, and advocacy. And Advocacy Day is our major advocacy function. We feel that climate policy is health policy. VCCA clinicians provide credible health-based perspectives on climate policy to ensure that these policies are made with the health of our citizens and communities as a top priority. And on one hand, we're very fortunate that the public perceives those in the health field as being very credible. And this is the most recent chart that I got from the Gallup organization. And they've done this in the past where they survey people to rate the honesty and ethics of various professions. And again, the top 3 professions are in the healthcare field. Nurses, again, are number 1. We have physicians as 2nd and pharmacists as 3rd. But with this high assessment from our citizens, there comes a certain responsibility. I was reminded of a phrase from many years ago, maybe before a number of you were even born. In the 70s, there was an investment company called E.F. Hutton. And they had a saying that when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. And so the same applies for those of us in the healthcare field. And we do have the credibility to hopefully influence people. So our Advocacy Day will be next Thursday, February 1st. This is a picture from one of the rooms of the new General Assembly building, which I'll be talking about more in a minute. And as Sam said, VCCA has been unique. We had our first Advocacy Day in 2018, where we just talked to lawmakers about health and economic benefits of clean energy, environmental justice, but never before had clinicians in white coats walk the halls of the General Assembly to discuss climate change solutions. So first, we're going to cover previous legislation, which we are going to express support for. And one is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and the second is Clean Car Standards. RGGI is an initiative that involves New England and Mid-Atlantic states, and it's a market-based effort among these states to cap and reduce CO2 emissions from the power sector. And with this program, electric power generation is the people doing that are required to buy allowances equal to their CO2 emissions, one allowance per each ton of CO2 emitted. And since 2005, RGGI states have reduced power sector emissions by 50%, which is 50% faster than the US as a whole. These states agree to a regional cap, which will decline over time, hence further helping to reduce the CO2 emissions. And from 2009 to 2014, those states involved in RGGI demonstrated the health benefits with fewer premature deaths, hospital visits, lost work or school days, associated with asthma and respiratory diseases, and strokes and heart attacks. And just relative to children, the health impacts were estimated as up to $200 to $300 million in avoided cost. And since the enactment of RGGI in 2021, the benefits for Virginia is that these quarterly auctions where these allowances are sold have generated over $800 million. And Virginia set up the program such that 50% of the proceeds would go to low-income energy efficiency programs and 45% to community flood preparedness. Virginia's program has slashed air pollution by 16% in its first 2 years. And you see the emissions of these noxious substances, sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, have fallen. And it's projected that by continuing in RGGI, Virginia will be able to drive down overall emissions by 30% by 2030. However, RGGI is being challenged. And when our governor was inaugurated last year, on his first day, he issued Executive Order 9 with an intention to withdraw from RGGI. And later that year in December, the Air Pollution Control Board issued the regulation to repeal RGGI. They had public comment periods, and overwhelmingly people spoke out against withdrawing from RGGI, but the Air Control Board published the appeal in July of last year. With that publish on the Register of legislation or regulations, then a suit was able to be filed. And the suit was filed on behalf of 4 conservation organizations who challenged the authority of the Air Pollution Control Board to actually issue this repeal. I was kind of excited because the suit was going to be brought in Fairfax County, with the courthouse being just up the road, and I thought it'd be very interesting to go observe that. But then the judge in Fairfax County determined that 3 of the 4 clients did not have standing. Therefore, it could not be heard in Fairfax County, and said the only one of the claimants was in Floyd County. So that's where it's going to be held. And preliminary motions in Floyd County will be heard on the 5th of February. So we're still in a holding pattern as to what the decision will be relative to this challenge to RGGI. Next is Advanced Clean Car Standards, previously passed legislation, which we felt was very important. In Virginia, 48% of CO2 emissions come from transportation. And in October of 2020, VCCA released a report that talked about the health burden of ambient particulate matter 2.5, a very fine particulate matter, on the health of Virginians. And in this report, we found that Virginia-specific transportation, the PM 2.5 released, was responsible for almost 100 deaths, 70 non-fatal heart attacks, and you see the other conditions as well on an annual basis. And the healthcare costs were about $750 million. Driving an electric vehicle at the time we put out this report was 67% cleaner in terms of CO2 emissions, which came from the electricity being generated by fossil fuel plants. That probably is higher now as we've had some decrease in our fossil fuel production electricity. And the reason that Virginia was able to participate or join Clean Car Standards had to do with the passage in 1970 of the Clean Air Act. At that time, California had more stringent controls relative to emissions, and the Clean Air Act allowed them to continue that and not have to comply with the federal standards, and gave them a waiver. And they created Section 177 that allowed any other state to adopt California's conditions without having to seek its own waiver of the federal standards. And that's the bottom line, shows the number of states that currently participate in advanced clean car standards. So this was passed by the General Assembly in 2021 and is effective with model year 2025, which is actually later this year. And so it's felt that this program would put Virginia on the pathway to 100% clean transportation. It states that energy manufacturers will sell 8% of their inventory will be zero emission vehicles. And we actually have had significant support from the Virginia Dealers Association in terms of their interest in selling EVs. And the potential in terms of the economy is that there could be a net job growth of 29,000 jobs by 2040, and also avoiding 48 million tons of cumulative carbon emissions by that year. But there have been challenges this year, just as there were last year. There are 6 bills which have been presented, 3 in the Senate and 3 in the House. The ones in the Senate went to the Agriculture, Conservation, National Resources Committee, and they were incorporated, I mean, they were bundled. And last week, the committee made a decision that these would be passed by indefinitely. Now, later in the talk, I'll show you what the committee decisions can be, but passed by indefinitely means that it is not getting out of committee. It will not be considered for a vote by the Senate itself. So that essentially shut those down. The House bills are currently at 2 different committees. They've not yet acted on those, and I'm not sure when that will be the case. Our new legislation for this year will be parking lot solar, and Joel Temme, who has been our point person for that, will present the details regarding that. And I do want to put in a kudos to Dr. Dute. She first brought this initiative to our attention, I believe it was after reading about what France had done in terms of putting solar panels over their parking lots. So thanks to Sam's highlighting this, we were able then to connect with organizations, the Piedmont Environmental Council. We also have had assistance from the Virginia Conservation group at George Mason. Joel will talk more about that. Then data center reform, and Paul DiLorenzo has been our point person for that. So he'll present that, and that's actually a very hot button issue this year for those of you who've been paying attention to what's going on with the data centers. Then I'll talk about what's called the Comprehensive Health Plan and a bill relative to tree canopy. So Joel, I'll turn it over to you, and just let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Sure. Thank you, Bob. I want to thank Bob. He's sort of the Wizard of Oz behind all these slides and presentations, and has done a phenomenal job. And as he referenced, VCCA in concert with PEC and the VCC has worked together in this past year to on the notion of parking lot solar with the hopes of developing a bill. And it was a fascinating experience to me, somewhat of a novice at this whole process, to see a bill come from a concept to actual reality, or at least close to reality. The bill SB 234 and HB 367 was created and presented by Senator Hashmi and Delegate Reed. I believe it goes to committee this Wednesday. It was put together by Ashish Kapoor from the Piedmont Environmental Council. And it was great working with VCC and the bright minds at George Mason's Department of Geology and Environmental Sciences. So if we go to the next slide, in summary, the problem is we're having ever increasing demands on our electricity needs, and Paul will talk a little bit about data centers, which is going to be a phenomenal increase. And there's been a lot of opposition to solar, particularly in Virginia, because of the impact on prime agricultural lands and forests. And there are folks who have joined that opposition because they don't want their farms taken up by mandatory solar farms. There's also a need and a real problem and delay. The transmission of large-scale solar to the grid requires it's a tremendous delay. The PJM grid takes about 5 to 7 years to connect a large solar project, and I think there's over 40 gigawatts of utility scale solar currently in the queue. And that's basically is going to open up because of this delay, it opens up the opportunity for non-carbon emitting sources to create energy. The parking lot solar, you can go to the next slide. The solution is actually a perfect match. Basically more parking lot solar. There's less removal of prime agricultural land. There's not going to be the same impact on the transmission grid and the transmission needs. We're going to generate cleaner air, less health impacts on Virginians. It's going to delay that long-term interconnection queue at PJM. And you can go to the next slide. But so building solar on parking lots uses the land that's already been existing land, that stormwater management plans have been completed, meaning additional mitigations such as buffers are not required. In essence, Virginia could, and this is phenomenal, Virginia could generate around 64 terawatt hours of energy from parking lot solar on an annual basis, which would approximate 50% of Virginia's energy usage. And if you go to the last slide, if we look at the United States, and this slide just basically demonstrates the potential, if we go with parking lot solar in the United States, if 50% of the current parking lots are covered, you're talking about some over 400 gigawatts of power. And if you optimize that to the high end estimates, you're talking about 800 gigawatts. And I think that, for instance, and Bob alluded to Sam's initiation of this conversation, in France, they passed legislation whereby parking lots of certain size, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 car parking spots, must go with parking lot solar by, I think, 2026. So, they're well ahead of the curve, and hopefully what this legislation will do, it's basically establishing a footprint and a basic sort of minor funding to study parking lot solar in Chesterfield County and the city of Richmond. Ashish sort of navigated this with Senator Hashmi, looking to push the bill to make sure it was favorable to the legislature. So it's a first step, and I think it's going to be a good foundation. So thank you very much.
Bill, that was great. Thank you for giving us the description of what this bill's about. And we'll keep our fingers crossed. I mean, the fact that we have it in both houses, which currently have, we think, favorable representation, I think there's a good chance this bill will pass the General Assembly. Paul, I'd like to turn it over to you, and I appreciate you giving us an update on data centers. Like I said, this is kind of a hot button issue. And just over the weekend, we heard from Julie Bolthouse, who's with the Piedmont Environmental Council, and she's been pretty much focused on this for a couple of years now. And she let us know there have been no fewer than 17 data center bills introduced. So we looked at this particular bill and felt that it most specifically addressed pollution, et cetera, that was really in our wheelhouse. So Paul, appreciate it. You want to take over?
Sure. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. So I'm in my office in the middle of patients. So if I go a little fast, I do apologize. Right, we met with Julie Bolthouse and some of the folks from Piedmont, some of the folks from the national parks, and there was formed a sort of data center coalition, and that we met with them as well. And ultimately, the goals of this came out to this bill, House Bill 116, and it's sponsored by Senator Delegate Sullivan and Senator Subramanian, as I can see. And thanks for providing, by the way, the slides, because I'd have a hard time getting them up on my phone. So
No problem.
essentially, the biggest problem with the data centers is their size, the fact that they are enormous in Virginia, and that we are using about 20% of our electricity through data centers. And you can see this slide that Bob put up shows the distribution of data centers in Virginia. Apparently, about 30% of all hyperscale data transmission goes through, I believe, mostly Northern Virginia. So that's not the slower data center, but 30% of the world is quite a lot. So again, the problem with putting more in is the tremendous demand on electrical power, the fact that Dominion Power would like to in order to compensate for that, build more natural gas building power production, which would be an environmental disaster. Can you go back up to, one slide? You can see that some of the things that come out of data centers are not only CO2, but also methane, particularly if there's a diesel generator for it. And then all these different nitric oxides, fluorocarbons, and this apparently terrible thing called nitrogen perfluoride. Some of these have various degrees of global climate change and global warming potential. Obviously, methane is worse than CO2 for heating up the Earth. But has a much shorter half-life in the atmosphere. So it's something good to kind of go after. And all of these have various characteristics. So if you go on to the next slide, thank you. So basically, again, we're a big, Virginia is the global data center state. It's not that that's a bad thing for the economy. It's just that we need to be able to power it, and we need to make it humanly environmental. And so we listed this little overview slide with the effects of issues with data centers impacting negatively on health, environment, and apparently when environmental issues become problematic, people actually become unhappy. So we've listed all the, as you can see, pollutants, their effects on increased mortality, particularly childhood asthma, but also adult respiratory disease, heart disease with heart attack, and vascular disease with stroke, and to a big extent as well, cancer. We also noted that the environmental consequences of climate change, such as heat, storms, flooding, habitat destruction, cause, again, tremendous problems, uh, and at a much increasing rate nationally. I think it's like 174 billion last year was spent on some of this cleanup and repairs, and also causes mental problems. So the grid expansion was going up. They were going to put up a lot more power lines, and we would be a state crisscross. So and also some people complain about the size of the buildings, their localization close to homes, and particularly close to parks, schools, and national parks. And so finally, complaints about noise pollution. Next slide. So basically, again, we sort of looked at the problems, including increase in the gigawatts, which is tremendous by Dominion Power. So the solutions, there's something called the Power Utilization Index, or sorry, Effectiveness Score. And with that score, many of the older, it has to do with how much power you pump into a data center and how much actually gets used functionally to process data. And so if it's 2 to 1, that means that half of your power is wasted. If it's so anyway, the goal in the efficiency standard that's more current is 1.2. So we're trying to hold Virginia to an efficiency standard of less than 1.2. So that's, about a sixth energy waste, which, there's all energy is lost through heat, obviously. And so you're going to lose some no matter what, through heat loss. And so in any case, so that's part of it, to get this efficiency utilization, power usage effectiveness down to 1.2, and to be in the top 15 percentile of energy efficiency compared to similar buildings. And again, if I haven't said, data centers, I can't quite remember, but I think they use somewhere between 2 and 6 times as much as a normal building. It may be 2 to 10 times, but it's a lot more. And that's why it all adds up. So environmentally, and that has to be by July 2024, so this year. Environmentally, data centers must procure carbon-free renewable energy or certificates for 90% of their electrical requirements. They're not allowed to use diesel for on-site power generation, again, because diesel tends to be among the worst of polluting. And also starting, and that's by January 2027, so a bit off. And then the final is by July 2024, data centers must submit annual reports to Virginia Economic Development Partnership Authority to show that they're in compliance. And I guess we put in all our recommendations, and you can see all the kind of sticks that we want, that we're going after them. Just, the carrot is that they would lose some of their tax exemptions if they don't comply with this. So I'm not sure if I put that in very well, but anyway, that's the downside if they decide to kind of go rogue. So that's the bill. It seems like something that we need to do in Virginia, and I think it's great that we have sponsors for it, and that I don't think it's a very extreme bill, by the way. I think it's a rather mild bill in many ways, but it's a start. Any questions I can answer?
Oh, that was great. Thank you. And I know you got to run to see patients. So John or Ryan, are there any questions surfaced specifically for Paul?
Not yet, but we will let
Okay.
Paul go, but try to answer any questions that come up after the fact in Q&A.
Paul, thank you very much. Okay, back
Thank
to
you for
your
inviting me.
catheterizations.
Actually, it's just patient care, but thanks again. Bye now.
Okay, Then I'll go ahead and talk about the two remaining new bills. And to discuss the comprehensive health plan, I have to explain what the Dillon rule is. Maybe everybody here knows that, but it is very interesting. At first, I thought it was unique to Virginia, but it states that municipal governments, being towns, counties, and cities, may adopt an ordinance only if the General Assembly, or whatever that legislative body is in a particular state, has clearly granted authority for the local government to make decisions on that topic. The map here shows, and I was kind of surprised, there are currently 39 states that have some form of a Dillon rule. So anyway, this bill looks like it's allowing localities to act on their own by giving them authority from the state legislator. And it says that beginning in July of this year, these localities will adopt healthy community strategy when they do their comprehensive plan, which I think is something they do on an annual basis. And it will allow them to identify neighborhoods with major sources of pollution or hazardous waste to reduce health risk. Hence, we think that this actually does tackle the climate change aspect of these pollution and certainly fits in our wheelhouse. And that is from Senator Bagby and Delegate Simons. And then the fourth bill is to protect tree canopy. And this one specifically, and this is from Delegate Hope, HB 529, states that trees, and this is the title, expands existing local government authority to conserve or replace trees during the development process. And from the summary, it says where I thought it, again, fit our objectives is to achieve MS4, which I had to look up, which stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. So to achieve MS4 stormwater nutrient reductions, mitigate urban heat islands, and increase resilience to climate change, including reducing coastal and island flooding and mitigate air pollution, they are setting in motion requirements that developers have to do in terms of protecting the tree cover in the areas that they're building in. And Virginia continues to lose both intact forest and urban tree canopy at an alarming rate. And despite committing to expand tree canopy in its phase 3 watershed implementation plan, Virginia suffered a net loss of almost 10,000 acres between 2014 and 2018. And canopy's loss contributes to degraded waterways and Virginia's ability to protect its residents from the impacts of climate change, such as inland flooding and negative health consequences of urban heat islands. These points are from the Virginia Conservation Network's Common Agenda, which it puts out each year in advance of the General Assembly. And this is from a organization called the Chesapeake Tree Canopy Network. And you can look at any particular county in the Chesapeake watershed. And I picked Loudoun County, and it will tell you what percent of that county currently has tree cover, what are the annual benefits by that tree cover, and what loss has occurred from 2014 to 2018. And then it also spells out specific benefits, like it says for Loudoun County, carbon sequestered value is 173,000 tons annually in terms of what's been removed. So that's it for our 4 bills. I'll do a quick run through of what I call some housekeeping issues prior to the General Assembly. And then we'll be happy to open up for questions that people might have. And I think John has indicated if you put those in the Q&A, he and Ryan will be monitoring those. So I put here the General Assembly building because this year we will be going to the new General Assembly building, which doesn't yet have any specific name. They just call it the General Assembly building. Previously, we had gone to the Pocahontas building. And I put a Google map in here to show how convenient this building is located relative to the Richmond Hilton. It's a 7-minute walk down East Broad Street. You can see where the Hilton is here. We hoof it down here. So this is even closer than what the Pocahontas building was. So our Advocacy Day will start on Wednesday, the 31st, and check with the Hilton. And they say check in for those who are getting rooms there is about 4 o'clock. Probably if you got there a little earlier, they would accommodate you. Its location is 501 East Broad Street. And then that evening from 6 to 7:30, we're going to have a cocktail social gathering and networking opportunity. And at 7:30, start with dinner and some guest presentations. And then the next day, on February 1st, we will do our specific advocacy activities. And at 7:45 till 9 o'clock, we'll have breakfast and advocacy training. And then from 9 to 11:30 will be our visits to our legislators in the General Assembly building. Then we'll all reconvene at noon and have a lunch, a debrief, and special presentations. So then we're going to talk about just the General Assembly in general, legislative process, and how to hold an effective meeting. And this year, the Senate has maintained the same distribution of parties with 21 Democrats and 19 Republicans. And with last year's election in November, the House of Delegates changed so that the Democrats now have the majority, a small one, with 51 seats versus 49. This is another picture of the new General Assembly building. And this is the calendar that the legislators operated under. And they were able to first start their pre-filing of bills in November, which was quite a bit later than last year, which was July. But it had to reflect what came from the election. They couldn't have legislators who weren't going to continue in office file bills. So anyway, so they had about 10 days to get these pre-filing in before it was to be drafted by the Department of Legislative Services, which writes up the bills in the proper legal or General Assembly language. The session itself started on the 10th, so about 2 weeks ago. And during this time, each chamber, the House of Delegates and the Senate, considers the bills in committee, and they make decisions about whether the bills will get to the floor or not. And if those bills that get to the floor are then voted on, those that are approved or passed that particular chamber on the 13th of February do crossover. So those approved bills in the House go to the Senate and vice versa. And then the same process starts again with committees considering bills. And the last day of the session is scheduled for March 10th. And at that time, all those bills that have been passed by both houses will be sent to the governor. And the governor then will consider these bills. And by April 8th, he will have to make a decision. And they could be that he'll do a line item veto. He may sign the bill. And also he may veto the bill altogether. So the legislators get back in session, reconvene it on April 17th, and they consider these bills that have come back from the governor. And if they're not in favor of him vetoing either a line item or the whole bill, it would require a 2/3 vote of each chamber to override the governor's veto. So kind of our bottom line is for the bills we're considering, if they do pass the General Assembly but get vetoed, I don't want to be negative, but it's unlikely we'll get 2/3 votes to override that veto, but we'll have to see. So anyway, those bills that are ultimately approved, the effective date of legislation is July 1st. Just a legislative process says the member of the General Assembly has an idea for a law, and he can get this from a lobbyist, an advocacy group, and this is where our role in parking lot solar fits in this. And the General Assembly member who introduced the bill becomes the quote, the chief patron. It's sent to the committee holds public hearings, and then they vote on a particular action. I'll show you those actions, in which case it goes to the full chamber, and it's either voted or voted in favor of or shot down. And then it goes over, and then it goes to the governor. And we talked about what the governor can do. So these are committee actions. If you like the bill and support the bill, or involved in the bill, you'd like to see one of these green highlighted phrases come out of committee. And if you don't like the bill, you would like to see one of these red phrases come out. And I think passed by indefinitely was used for some bills we weren't happy about, and I'll show you that in a second. Okay, chances for advocacy, obviously when the bill is formulated, you can communicate with the lawmaker, or when it's in committee. You can communicate with the chair of the committee, members of the committee. You can attend public hearings and make comments. Now, the advocacy process, here are some do's and don'ts. Do explain why you care, why you're enthusiastic about this bill, what you think the importance of it is. Identify if you're a constituent, because the legislators are going to be more interested, unfortunately, and well, realistically, in what a person who might vote for them is talking to them about. We talk about bringing a handout, a little dated. We sent a lot of this electronically. If you have a personal story, and in the healthcare field, that can happen very often. When you talk about a patient, maybe a family member, anybody who's been impacted negatively by something to do with climate change. And giving them a hard ask is not inappropriate. You can say, do you support the bill on parking lot solar? And at least you'll know where you stand. What you don't do is think of them as celebrities, be intimidated, be afraid to talk to them. Don't debate. If they express something that sounds like a contrary position, not the time to go head to head and try to convince them. May create a lot more negativity by doing that. Don't go on tangents. Remember the time you have. Sometimes you only have 15 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. So you want to make sure you get your points delivered. And only bring up facts and studies, things that are concrete. So I'm going to take just a minute to talk about the legislative information system. And let me call this up. And this is a wonderful tool. So I get it expanded here. Here we go. That you can follow any bill. And when you sign in to LIS, which is typically how you can get there into Virginia LIS, it will show you on the home page that you can look for bills, General Assembly members, the standing committees. So I want to use one of the bills challenging clean car standards. And so we'll go to bills and resolutions. And if you know the bill number, like in this case, Senate Bill 3, you can put that in, go to the bill, and it will tell you that this was introduced by Senator Stewart, and it says that it is talking about repealing the State Air Pollution Control Board's authority to implement low emission and zero emission vehicle standards. And you can see what has happened to it. It was directed to the Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources. And what ultimately happened in this committee was that they voted to pass it by indefinitely. So this shows you who voted to do that and who voted against that. So if you actually, during Advocacy Day, are having a meeting with one of these senators, you could say, hey, we're happy that you did not support repealing clean car standards. Now, if you're meeting with Republicans, you may not want to mention much of them, because I suspect it was pretty close to unanimous in that caucus. Now, one of the other clean car standards bills was, let's see, SB 53, I believe. And if you go to this one, you'll see that this reflects the bundling that they did when it says it was incorporated by Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources. And that was on a unanimous vote. They really said, okay, let's just all consider these all together along with the consideration for Senate Bill 3. So that tells you what happened to those bills. And then we're going to go to seeing how you find the status of a particular bill you're interested in. In this case, we will go to Senator Hashmi and our parking lot solar bill. So you go here, and as Joel indicated, she's a chief patron for parking lot solar. So you go here and you can find the bill she's chief patron for, and we'll talk about parking lot solar. And it shows that it's been referred to the Committee on Commerce and Labor. You click on that, and they've not yet made a decision, but they might be meeting this afternoon. So later today or tomorrow, we may know if indeed parking lot solar got out of committee. So that will conclude what I want to say about LIS. And I'll get back to my slides. And happy to open up now for, oh, I'm sorry. I put some links in here, which people will receive slides later, how you can get to, if you have any questions for John or me, and how you access the LIS system, the common agenda for VCN, and the tree canopy charts. Anyway, so thank you. And any questions? So John or Ryan, do you have any that have come up in the Q&A?
We do, Bob. We have a question from Homan asking about what we do if our representative is the patron of a bill that relates to climate change, but not selected as one of our primary four that VCCA is advocating for. For example, Senator Marsden is a patron of SB 457, Driving Decarbonization Program and Fund, currently referred to the Ag Committee.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And we certainly would like to recognize that Senator Marsden is motivated to address climate change. And so, Holman, I think in this situation, you can say, well, here are the bills that we have specifically identified, but we know that you are committed to addressing the impact of climate change with your introduction of bill such and such. And we really appreciate you taking that role. So I think you can acknowledge that. That can help you get some more brownie points during your meeting. So I wouldn't be afraid to do that as an individual. You could say, well, speaking for myself, I'm happy that you are introducing this. I think you probably asked this in the context of, if we mention this, does that imply that VCCA has taken a formal position? I think to get around that, you could say something like, speaking for myself, or I also see that the senator is interested or concerned about climate change because he has introduced such and such a bill. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
I guess you can't reply, sorry. Okay.
Bob, we've got another question here. Maybe Joel, you might have some input on this too, just about what the opposition's talking points against parking lot solar might be and how we can prepare for any pushback that we might get on that issue.
I think at this point, it basically is a win-win, because one of the largest communities that opposes solar in Virginia is the ag community. And this sort of bypasses the need to take up valuable agricultural land. I think the other side is the cost, because it is very expensive, and I don't have exact numbers. But I think the SREC notion and the SREC reimbursement should offset those costs and become a carrot for hopefully proposing these or supporting this program, and the ease with which it can go online versus going through the transmission grid. So SREC is it's a solar energy credit, which basically, if you produce X kilowatts over what you use, there's a payment for that. That payment is decided, or would be decided, by the committee, which actually is going to be created in this bill. Currently, for instance, an individual homeowner can put up solar on their house, and if they use less energy, that energy goes back, because Dominion has net metering, meaning you take what you use, you subtract that from what you produce, and that becomes a positive energy production for which you would be paid by Dominion a fee. And right now, I think it's somewhere between $40 and $50 per kilowatt over your usage. So the idea here is you create these tremendous production entities, and they can then, hopefully overproduce, like the Walmarts of Virginia could really help us drive our energy needs tremendously. So anyhow, that's the main objection that I know of, but there may be others.
Yeah, Joel, that was great. Appreciate the depth of your answer there. But this is basically a carrot process. There's no stick. This is not going to mandate that solar panels be put over parking lots. It's not like France. As Joe identified, the SREC. So if a developer says, hey, I would like to put solar panels in the parking lot because you have this system where I can get some credits, they get money for doing it.
Yeah.
Next question.
Bob, we don't, please, everyone, feel free to put additional questions in the Q&A, but one point that I wanted to just briefly make here, and I think Bob mentioned this before, but anyone on this call, please do not get intimidated by the terminology and the language that go along with some of these policy matters. The truth is that none of us are experts in all matters of this policy and all of the implications and ins and outs and technicalities of them. You don't need to be in order to support it. You can speak to the goals and the aspirations that these types of policies are leading us to, a world or a state where we make policy decisions based on reducing our impact on the environment and protecting the health of our citizens here. So at any point, if you get challenged on what something means or what the numbers are associated with something, please don't feel like it's your job to know all of the ins and outs of these detailed proposals, but rather say, I'm here because I'm concerned about the health of my patients, my friends, my family in Virginia. And I know that climate change and carbon pollution are a major driver of that and threaten our safe and healthy future. And I see this policy as something that would take a small step and improve that situation. So it's please don't think that you have to be a detailed policy expert in order to speak effectively in favor of these bills that we are presenting here, or others that you may identify throughout the course of this process.
John, that's great to bring that up. Also, there's an opportunity, and I didn't mention that as in terms of your meetings, your legislators, to continue channels of communication. If somebody asks you a question and you're not sure, you can say, well, let me look into that and get back to you. So that can continue your connection. And as to the details, I was curious as to what was in the pre-canopy bill. And so I printed it off, and I didn't show you, but there's a 6-page PDF that goes with it. And I started reading it and I'm going, I better know what the high level point, because it goes into incredible detail. So yeah, if you really want to, and I didn't show you, but LIS for each of the bills listed, you can actually get the formal language. But that's why it's good to have summaries. And we will be providing talking points for participants of our advocacy day. So that'll be the high level issue. And that's primarily, I think, what you want to communicate with the legislator. John, any more questions? I think we've got a couple more surfaced.
Well, we had one come in from Bruce about the talking points, and yes, Bruce, like Bob just said, we will provide specific talking points on each of these bills that we're hoping all of you get a chance to raise with your legislators next week. The Virginia Conservation Network is a coalition that we are a part of as well, and they maintain a priority bill tracker throughout session that includes resources and talking points and bill summaries and lay language that we'll be utilizing to pull in for our advocacy day, along with some additional talking points. And then the next one is, do we have a role, Bob, in discussing the budget process with our delegates, specifically around Reggie?
Well, I will ponder this for a second. I know VCN, I'll just talk for a little bit here, talks about the budget process, and they get involved with their various organizations as to where they can provide input for the budget. And relative to Reggie specifically in the budget process, that's interesting because Reggie is actually collecting funds externally from the auctions that are held on a quarterly basis. So I don't know that there's much budget provided by Virginia other than some administrative costs, but I think those come out of the Reggie proceeds as well. Now, when you talk about budget, the governor, in his efforts to repeal Reggie, has already allocated certain monies towards, I think, flood mitigation, trying to, I think, blunt the challenge the challenge to his move to repeal because you have significant loss of money. So as you saw, there's over $800 million that have come in just within 3 years of Reggie. So I don't know if right now I don't have, I guess, an answer. So I don't know if anybody else had a chance to think about that in terms of how to better answer this question.
Yeah, Bob, I will say to Nick, who asked this, that the budgetary process gets very complicated and very fast moving, and is often something where you have a support for a budget amendment until the 11th hour, when something gets quickly changed and all of a sudden the position needs to be flipped. And our lack of ability to track all of those changes in real time makes it difficult for us to suggest specific budgetary support. at this stage, but we certainly will be keeping an eye on that throughout our partners. And if an opportunity comes up throughout session to support something along those lines in line with these policies, we'll certainly make everyone aware of those.
And John, if I could just add, for the attendees, that VCCA did work with the UVA Environmental Law Clinic and the Virginia Energy Efficiency Council. And we submitted an amicus brief in support of the plaintiffs who are the one, I guess, remaining plaintiff in the case, which is against Virginia's leaving the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So VCCA is party to that amicus brief.
John, I think we got a couple more questions.
See, I have not seen any come in, Bob.
Okay, I saw a number 6 up there a few minutes ago. I don't know. Okay.
I think, oh, nope, we do. Mine just uploaded. We got one comment from Leon Vinci. Last week, he was at the Capitol to address gun-related violence and got the chance to walk through the new tunnel and meet some legislators. A staunch Republican in his area was moved and demonstrated a capacity to rethink his position. Because of some recent redistricting, he had inherited a much more blue district than previous, so realized he needed to think more broadly. And Leon's recommendation to the group is do not count anyone out, and that there's still hope on these climate issues and many others, especially as it relates to personal health for constituents. And I will back Leon up on that. I think that we have anecdotal and firm evidence just in recent years that there is a possibility to kind of find common ground on these issues in a very polarized and partisan environment. And that's why we try to ground all of the bills that we support and the motivation that we have coming to this work in protecting health, which should be a non-controversial motivation for everyone. So as much as we can connect with people and get them to see these issues as health related, then I think that we'll find more and more success. All right, I think that we are right at time and haven't had any other questions come in. So I think that we can wrap up here. And I want to thank Bob, Joel, and Paul for presenting on these complex topics. Certainly none of their careers prepared them to take on this role. And we really appreciate them becoming self-taught experts and passing along their knowledge to all of us so that we can benefit and hopefully get some policies passed in Virginia that have positive results for all of us and future generations. So thank you all. And we're really looking forward to seeing everyone who's able to come to Advocacy Day next Wednesday. We'll gather in Richmond. Please get in touch if you have any questions on that event, and we'll also look forward to providing more opportunities beyond Advocacy Day around these bills and continue to update everybody throughout the session. Bob, the last comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm. I see one question about will these slides be shared? First, this video, there's a video has been recorded of this presentation. And John, relative to sharing the slides, I'm happy if you want to send them out. I can send them to you.
Sure, we'd be
Okay.
happy to. We'll make the recording available to everyone along with the slides. And Leon, you'll be getting information on the bus logistics this week. All right. Thank you
Thank you,
very
everybody.
much, all.